I think what you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, et cetera. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia.
One thing if it's just a minor incursion, just dipping the toe in the water. Joining me now, we need an expert in here, Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano. He's, of course, Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy at Heritage Foundation. Colonel, obviously not Joe Biden's finest moment. It was a rough presser anyway, but telling the enemy what apparently he's been discussing privately is generally frowned upon when it comes to foreign policy.
Well, so there's 2 points here that probably need to be made. One is we are way past a tiny incursion versus an all-out war. The reality is if a Russian soldier steps over the line, the Ukrainians are going to be at war, and 44 million Ukrainians are going to be fighting them. So this is going to, if there's a war, it's going to be a big war. If the Russians just wanted to, take a gas station or something, they'd have been they could have just done that, and probably it would have been over before anybody noticed. But now the entire world is watching. So as far as the Ukrainians are concerned, there's war or no war. There's no in between. So even trying to make that distinction is stupid. But put that's point one. Point two is the president said that. And then the Secretary of State absolutely went out and said something 180 degrees different, which is if the Russians attack, it's a problem. We're in the middle of a crisis, and the president and the Secretary of State can't get on the same page. So that's a big problem. So none of this gives me warm and fuzzies about this administration's ability to deal with this crisis.
Colonel, everything else aside, we're going to get back to all that here in just a moment. Can you, just from a neutral observer standpoint, Ukraine's military capability versus Russia's military capability? Obviously, everyone knows Russia's a lot bigger, a lot more powerful. Is Ukraine virtually useless? Can they make this a fight? What is their military capability?
Well, there's 44 million Ukrainians, and they are armed, and they're getting, now we're finally giving them arms and ammunition. If the Russians want to fight, then the worst thing that could happen is they don't just win. And for them to win, they would have to really pound Ukraine, which means they'd have to establish air supremacy, which they would have to do with aircraft and bombing, and they would have to do an immense amount of destruction in order to be able to confidently invade the Ukraine. So there's no way this doesn't wind up being an incredibly bloody war. And there aren't millions of refugees pouring into the rest of Western Europe. Matter of fact, there already are millions of refugees from the last war in the Ukraine. So there's no way this doesn't wind up being a big bloody war if they cross the line. And here's the other problem.
All right.
Which is, when does it end? I mean, this could wind up being Russia's Afghanistan. The Ukrainians are going to continue to fight. And that those insurgencies will be based on countries like Poland, which aren't going to stop them from doing that. Are the Russians then going to start bombing Poland? So it gets pretty scary pretty quickly.
All right, Colonel, I know this is a little bit outside the norm, but I'm trying to look at this right now from Vladimir Putin's standpoint. From what I understand about Vladimir Putin, he's not politically the most popular guy in the world. He maintains his hold on power by being Mr., strong man, bring Russia back kind of thing. Right. If you're Vladimir Putin, you've got your army amassed at the border, you're making all these threats, you're saber rattling. How does one back out now with no violence and still maintain his hold on power? Does that make sense? Yeah. Is there a way out where Vladimir Putin doesn't look like a big softy?
Yeah, sure. He could do nothing and pull the troops home. And then he'll just say, look, I scared them. I mean, he's already won in a sense that he's rattled NATO to its core. He's looked strong and powerful. He's exposed the divisions within the alliance. He's made Biden look weak and feckless. So it's hard to see how he doesn't win. But this gets to an interesting point, which is, it's really up to Putin. I mean, he's the only guy that can decide what happened here. And I will say this is, unlike Tojo or Adolf Hitler, Putin's been around a long time, and he's managed to avoid World War III. And the point is, if he launches into the Ukraine, how 100% confident is he that this is going to go well, and this doesn't spin it out of control and become something he can't control? Is the risk, because we all know he wants Ukraine back. I mean, he wants all of Eastern Europe back, but it's like Clint Eastwood. Do I have 5 bullets or 6 bullets? Is today the day he's going to risk everything? Because Putin's been very smart. He's done a lot of things, some of them very risky, some of them very reckless, but he's never put everything on the line the way Hitler did, for example, when he invaded Poland and later Russia. So I think that's something we have to think about.
Colonel, this actually, hearing you talk about it made me think about this little cut I saw from Anthony Blinken about maybe we already got rolled. Watch this.
The diplomacy, the consistent calls for meetings right now that the Russians are doing, do you think they're genuine about diplomacy, or do you think they're just essentially playing out the calendar here because he's not going to upset Xi in the Olympics? And essentially, we're making it look more legitimate by negotiating. Are you worried that he's playing us a little bit?
Look, it is certainly possible that the diplomacy that Russia is engaged in is simply going through the motions, and it won't affect their ultimate decision about whether to invade or in some other way intervene or not in Ukraine.
Colonel, it's obviously no secret countries like this. I mean, North Korea has been doing this forever. They launch a couple missile tests, get a little bit belligerent, and then soon you have more food and money getting dropped to you from the Western nations. Is that what all this is?
Well, look, it's kind of stunning. You just heard Blinken say, well, maybe this is all just for show. The entire American strategy was built around diplomacy to de-escalate the situation. And he just acknowledged that that's all maybe meaningless. And the reality is it is meaningless. And anybody could have told you that 3 months ago. What's going to affect Putin's ultimate calculus is strength. What is the West willing to do? If we're willing to arm the Ukraine, contribute to their self-defense, protect our own territory, not concede anything that Putin wants, that he will take notice of. The diplomacy is just meaningless window dressing. And to actually hear the Secretary of State say, well, yeah, it's probably just meaningless window dressing, when that's actually been the core of American strategy for 2 months, is kind of shocking and again, disturbing.
Hey, thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and like and subscribe. You heard me. Like it, subscribe. You'll get a lot more of it and a lot more of me.